Steve, how you doing, sir?
I'm good, mate. What about you?
I'm grateful for all the things that life has brought me. Not that I could have said that 5 or 6 years ago, but I have definitely changed. What about yourself? You know, it's been, what, a year now since you've lost your job?
Yes, it has. Been a very interesting journey. Yeah, indeed.
So, Steve, what we're talking about today?
Perhaps we should look and have a little discussion around what it might mean to have the dark night of the soul.
La noche oscura dell'anima. You know, the Chinese have a saying, or had a saying, that may you live in interesting times. But that was a curse. I said La noche oscura dell'anima. It comes from St. John of the Cross, I believe. I think it was a Spanish prelate or priest, 16th century. Oh, you got the book. Of course you'd have the book. And he saw it as a purification of the spirit. Today, it could also mean a difficult, painful period in life. Now, I went through it 2014, definitely to 2016, with some residue over 2 or 3 years beyond that. But what is it? It's not a mental or a nervous breakdown as far as I'm concerned. It's an ego death. It's a stripping away of all the crud that we've been led to believe is important. And something triggers it. It could be trauma, accident, loss of somebody, loss of job. And you start to go through this very long tunnel, dark tunnel, where there doesn't seem to be much light at the end of it. And what I'm going to talk about now, having gone through it, and you're probably a quarter of the way in, halfway in, I don't know how far, Steve, I would not have accepted or even know what I'm talking about before it started. You have to go through this to experience it, to understand what I'm going to say. I can't talk for yourself, Steve. But when I was a younger man, if I was in my 30s, 40s, I think, what's he talking about? So it's going to be painful to recount, and I think it's one of the most important things that you could go through, but I wouldn't want to go through it again. What about yourself? You got the book. You know more than me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the book is based upon the poem that was written by St. John of the Cross. I would agree with your general summation, actually. The dark night of the soul is a difficult, painful period that you go through, and it's how you work through it and the steps that you take to work through it, and recognizing that it is nothing more than just a part of the journey that you are on, and that you will at some point come out. And when you do come out, you might be on a total different piece of terrain or shoreline than you were expecting, but you will come out of it. That's as simple as that. It will pass. Everything does. I think you said it was a stripping away for you. I referred to it as a stripping back of everything that I thought and held close to me, and the things that I held of value, and it all got stripped back and it all got peeled off. What you're left with is what you're left with, and then you go from there. And also, I think you said it's normally triggered by something, whether it's an event, some sort of trauma or something like that. And again, I think that's right. When I think back to some of the darkest periods that I've worked my way through, have always been triggered by something. They've been triggered by a relationship breakdown or a death, or even, as we spoke about last year, the end of a career. They leave you in a place that you've got to work through. Yeah, I'd be interested to hear what you've got to say.
Yeah, it's an ego death. And before you embark on such a thing, you are not aware that you're dominated by your ego. So Freud gave us the idea of the tripartite mind. So there's the id, which is our reptilian part of the brain. It just keeps us alive. Must sleep, must go toilet, must eat. And then there's the ego that develops when you're about 4 or 5, that you're different to everybody else around you, and you get this sense of self. And then there's the super ego, which is your conscious, if it develops, about right and wrong and moral compass. But the ego, although it's important, it can also be a bloody curse. Because if you don't keep your ego in check, you can very easily fall into the trap of thinking only you're important. What's the joke? How many Harvard law graduates does it take to change a light bulb? Only one. He holds it up, or she holds it up, and the world revolves around it. Well, that world doesn't revolve around you. And when you get into certain jobs, and if you're promoted very quickly and get into a position before you've had time to know adversity and things not going your way, you can become set in such a way that you're a bloody narcissist, sociopath. So I'm not saying I was any of those, but what the ego death does, it strips away sense of vanity, false sense of self-importance. And yes, it is a spiritual experience because you're not talking about the 3D self, you're talking about the higher self, the stuff, thought, mind, beyond that. And I remember laying in bed thinking, God, am I ever going to earn money again? Because when I was a kid, I was told, get a house and you'll be made. Get a job, earn money. In other words, get tied to the rat race, and that's your sense of worth. Well, it isn't. Because when that goes, well, what's that tell you? What worth have you got then? So it's a false path. And if anything, the tunnel shunts you off that and makes you evaluate, is that where you should be going? And for me, it was 50 years of treading. I lost a job in the 90s. I went out and got another one. Made the mistake of working for the same old crap, putting up with the same old nonsense, the same old idiots, getting made redundant again. What is life for? What am I? Why?
I think that you are absolutely right, mate. I think that you are absolutely right. We need to recognise, and you pointing those 3 points that you picked up, the id, the ego, and the superego. We need to recognise the ego, and we need to recognise what a curse it can be. It can also be a blessing, but it can be a flipping significant curse. And you need to understand that. You need to understand what motivates you, what drives you. And I think one of the lessons that you need to learn early on in life, and I don't think that we are teaching this at all well in society today, is the universe does not revolve around me. I am not, no matter how much I want to be, I am not the centre of the universe. And whether or not I am here or whether I'm not here. The world will keep spinning, the universe will keep expanding, and I am completely insignificant to the vast majority of it. So that should crystallise focus. I think I sat one day and I actually worked out on the fingers of my hands just how many people would be significantly affected if I was no longer here. And I didn't get beyond the digits on my hands. No more than 10 people in a planet of 8 billion. The universe doesn't revolve around me. I am not the centre of the universe. So what am I? What am I? Well, I'm a unique individual, like everybody is a unique individual. And what I have to do is try and find where my place in this crazy mixed up world, where I can offer the best service to others. And I think that if we recalibrate our lens to say, how can I best serve other people rather than how can I best self-serve? You know, the point that you raised about when we were young, and it's all about getting a house and getting a good job and getting your money in under your belt and saving up for the rainy day and all the rest of it. But ultimately, none of this matters because, as you have known in the past and as I found out last year, you can serve 40 years and the next minute you're out, and that's it. And then I've had no income for a year. I've had no money coming in for a year. And how do you deal with that? How do you live? You just do, and you find other ways of doing things, and you change your focus of what's important to you. Everything has to change. Everything has to be put in the right priority box. We've said before, and I know that you have touched on this comment. Nobody on their deathbed is going to say, I wish I worked a few more hours. You know, they're going to be wanting to know that they've engaged with their family. They're going to be wanting more time with their loved ones. And ultimately, that is where things have gone wrong and where we have been robbed by the spirit of this age. And the spirit of this age is all about material possessions, money, grabbing, power, influence through finance and that sort of thing. And we have been robbed of what really, really matters. It takes the dark night of the soul at times, you know, suddenly finding yourself in situations where you can't run away from it, you can't divert, you can't detour, you're now stuck right in the centre of it. That book, The Dark Night of the Soul, in the copy that I've got, there's an opening comment in it, and it says, when despair and suffering, evil, and even ultimately death face us, there is no point trying to run away. The darkness is real, and we must go into it, and we must own our darkness. And when I was reading that, I was thinking, yeah, you know what, that's what you have to do. You have to own your darkness. You have to recognise what you are, what makes you tick, and own it. And then, once you own it, you can overcome it, because you're now the controller of it. And so I don't think it's about not being dark. It's about recognizing what can make you dark, own it, become the master of it, control it, and change. And when you start to put things like that in place, and you've almost got to embrace the place that you're taken to, you've got to embrace that darkness that you're taken to in order to come through it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Mine happened 2014 to 2016. It was hard work, and there was an odd thing that happened. Not only did I often stop myself thinking, WTF, I had this sense of being lost and I couldn't find my way. And looking back, I've actually used this in my second book. I had this sense that time shattered. At time, it was like I was surrounded by a frosted prism I couldn't quite look out of. And 2 years just went like that. In fact, I got very little memory of it. And it was very similar to when I was a child. It must be the trauma, the shock. And I would have waking daydreams, visions. I told you about one, and it was bizarre. It was 3 years before I went onto Facebook and joined the old Charybdis Facebook group. And I imagined you and all the others that I worked with saying, join us, come. And it was this bizarre, where am I going? What's this all? How much time have I got left? I think it was, I'd hit 50. I'm not saying it was triggered by age, but of course there's something in that. It's lack of purpose. And the thing that got me through it was a book that I'd read years before and completely forgot about. And I reread it, and it's almost like it was written for me. It's Boethius, Consolations of Philosophy. Now, Boethius lived in the 5th century. He was a scribe, an amanuensis for one of the Gothic kings of North Italy. And he had everything. He had massive wealth, huge house, great esteem. Well, he pissed off the king, who threw him into prison, and he ended up executing him. And in the time between being put in prison and his execution, he wrote this book. And it's almost as though it's written by someone who's gone through the dark night of the soul. But he has philosophy as an old woman coming to console him, and basically saying, be grateful for what you've got and what you will have. And I read this and thought, yeah, this is the thing. I think when you're about halfway through this well of despond, like Batman crawling out the pit, there's only one way. And then you start seeing the light and you think, no, this is not going to crush me if you survive this. And I'm going to be a better person. I'm not going to be told that I am something because I have a job or I have this cassette player or this house. No, I value other things. And that is the next bit I want to just talk about. You reforge your personality. You become a new person. You have, Steve, in the time that we've got back together back in 2020. That first person when you was working as a copper still to what you are now, it's almost like chalk and cheese. And I mean that in a good way.
Yeah. I think the points that you pick up are very, what's the word that I'm looking for?
Shite?
No, not at all. They are very consistent with anybody that has experienced this. Yeah, so you talk about being lost, you talk about lack of purpose, you talk about how, when you eventually start to come out of it and you realise it's about being grateful, etc., etc. They resonate with me because I felt like I was unhinged from everything that I had been hinged into, and I'd suddenly been pulled out of it, and you just don't know where you are. It was like being tossed onto the sea without an anchor, and you're just being tossed around by the storm and the waves, and you don't know which direction you're going to go into, and you don't know whether you're going to hit the rocks because you've got nothing to anchor you anywhere. And that speaks to purpose, I think, because a purpose will anchor you somewhere. And we all need to have purpose in life. Now, people will find their purpose in different things. Some people will find their purpose in their career. Some people will find it in making money. Some people will find it in something else, But we've all got to have a purpose that we drive for. You can then argue the merits of what that purpose is, a separate issue. My purpose was service, as was yours. We signed up to serve the Crown, and we served the Crown, and I continue to do that. And I got a great sense of my identity and this is something else that you touched on, being defined by the role. I got a great sense of my identity, who I was through my service to the organisations that I served. This was who I was. Well, no, it's never who I was. It's the coat that I wore, and you have to unwrap yourself from all of that as well. So it's a great unravelling time. It's a great time of pulling you apart, stripping you back, as I say, revealing what you really are underneath all of the layers of crap that you wrapped around yourself over all of the years of the life that you've been living, and helping you then step out of that. It's almost like a chrysalis, and you are about to emerge as something slightly different from what you went in as. The caterpillar becomes the chrysalis forms, and then something else comes out. Now, you might come out as a mangy old moth, or you might come out as an incredibly beautiful monarch butterfly. Something, ta-da, here I am. Who knows what you're going to come out of, but you're going to come out as something different. You will definitely come out as something different. And I think that that's one of the things that you should always take hold of when you're going through these dark places, is that look on it as an opportunity of refinement. Look on it as an opportunity to actually rub rough edges off you, to shape you in a slightly different shape, in order for you to be in the best possible shape for the next step that you're going to take going forward. And I think that is really important, along with the gratefulness. So I would say contentment. What it does do, I think, is it makes you more content with everything that you have got, as opposed to constantly striving for stuff that you haven't got. I'm not a particularly content man, because I've always been driven. I've been driven to achieve. I've been driven to do this. I've been driven to go on this course and to complete that, and to work with these people. I've always been driven. But I've reached a point now where I'm much more content to go, you know what, I've done all right, and I'm pretty happy with that, and that's it. And, if I don't achieve much more, well, I've probably achieved more than some people would have done in their lives. And, I'm never going to be the Prime Minister of the country, or I'm never going to be something else. I'm never going to be Elon Musk and as wealthy as he is. But you know what? That doesn't matter. I've set out my purpose, and I've got it written up here, right in front of me on a whiteboard. What is my purpose? And it just touches into 4 areas. And for me, it touches into the transcendent, God. That's my first purpose, followed by people, followed by work, followed by looking after a church. So that's it. God, people, work, church. There you go. That's my purpose. Now, how that purpose is manifest, well, it will get manifest in different ways, and one will dial up, one will dial down. So it's a horizontal rather than a vertical purpose, if you know what I mean. You dial up one, you dial down the other, type of thing, but you keep them all on a constant.
Very good. I wrote down some things as you were talking. You're right. As you're going through it, you feel that you're adrift upon the deep, and what you go through is deconstruction. And then you co-construct with the universe coming forward. I need to explain that in a moment. And you end up sailing upon blessed shallows. It's no longer a fear to you. Absolutely correct when you say about gratitude. I've wrote down here at the end, it's love, gratitude and forgiveness, like I've said before. The other thing is, and I've said this in a previous long, that the Lutein Bell, when it was lost at sea and it was found, it had been on the seabed so long it was unrecognisable. It was all out of shape. Someone had to chip it away, and now it's this beautiful bell that's in Lloyd's of London. And that is what happens to our ego. You chip away at all the crap that you believe is important. Before you go through the dark night, you don't know that. Totally oblivious to it. Only when you're out of the dark night can you look back and think, why did I ever think that was what was important in life? There's a book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces, and in it talks about the typical hero starts an adventure. He goes through challenges to the point of the abyss, possibly stares or falls into the abyss. He comes out transformed and is a new self. It's the stock of nearly all stories, isn't it? Farm boy made good. Think of Star Wars. And there's a guy called Eckhart Tolle who says it's not for everyone. It won't be for everyone. We're going to have people listening to this who will never go through this or never feel that they have gone through it. For those who go through it, it's part of an awakening purpose. Interesting, you talked about the 4 things that you now value. You go through this sense of emptiness where nothing makes sense. You're in a dark place, but at the end of it, you emerge into light. And I'm conscious these sounds very spiritual, religious phrases, but you certainly are at a new place of a new consciousness, a new purpose, a new knowing and reality. And for myself, to finish off, a realization that I spent 50 years half awake, constantly being triggered by lack mentality, often deficit theorizing without realizing it, sarcasm as a shield rather than as a lance. And that person is gone.
It's all a journey, mate, isn't it? And you think back over your life and you think back about the person that you were. Well, you needed to be that person at that particular stage of your life in order to achieve the things that you achieved in your life at that time. But that doesn't mean to say that you have to stay that type of person. And, I think back over my career and the things that I did and the training that I went through and the things that I was successful in. And I had to become a certain type of person in order to achieve those things, because you have to. You just can't. You can't not. You have to become something in order to get through that sort of stuff. But that's not who I was. But it played its part for where I needed to get to, because I was on a journey and I didn't realise that I was on a journey. I thought I'd arrived. Well, no, you have never arrived. Everything is a journey. This life is a journey, and it's a journey of discovery. So we are walking this world not because we think we have got it all mapped out and all laid out and that we know exactly where it's all going to end. We're on a journey of discovery, and we are morphing and we are changing through different faces. A hero of 1,000 faces. That's what we're going through. We are becoming different faces. We are becoming different people as we travel and as we come across different terrain and different people and different influences. And we end up in a point where I think Eckhart Tolle is right. It is an awakening. You do wake up and you look back at where you've come from, and you go, flipping heck, I can't believe I did that, or I can't believe I was like that, and now I don't see it like that. But I'm also aware that while I'm looking back at that, I can't project what I am into the future, because in the future I might look back at where I am today and go the same thing. I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I thought that. I can't believe I had those views. So I think that our journey, our trajectory should always be looking to improve on where we are today in terms of our understanding of things and of people and of how we interact with things. Because it should be a constant trajectory upwards, not a spiral downwards. And I think if we're doing that, and we've got a clear idea of why we're doing it, where we're anchored into, I think that brings some great strength to the walk.
It's interesting you talk about the walk, because you're talking about Christianity there for yourself. Am I correct?
I am, and I'm not. I'm talking about the walk of life. The walk of life. That as we walk this life, whether you're a spiritually inclined individual or not, really shouldn't matter. You should still be looking to pursue the greatest good that you can pursue, and have the greatest purpose that you can find. What you find to be that purpose, what you anchor yourself into, is going to differ for different people. I would say the greatest purpose is the pursuit of God, because if there is such a thing as God, that's got to be the greatest thing. Others would say, well, there is no such thing as God, so I'm going to go for the next best thing, which is this. And then you argue about the merits of whatever that purpose is. But you should always be looking to pursue something that is going to lift you, and not only lift you, but to then lift other people around you. But recognize that there are these periods of time where we go through dark. You're on a railway track, you're in a carriage, and the train has to go through a dirty great big tunnel in the hillside before it comes out into the vistas of the other side. And this is life. We are all on a journey, and we will all go through some very dark tunnels at some point. And ultimately, we all end up in a very dark tunnel, and it's where you get spat out at the end of that really matters.
If anyone listens to our second channel, Sacred Book, probably know that I'm an atheist, but I am very spiritual. And when I went through the dark night of the soul, I realised that, of course, there is a greater power beyond ourselves and guiding us towards that dark night of the soul, because it's ultimately for our benefit. You wouldn't want to wish it on anybody, but if you're going to go through it, you come out far better. It's like a sword being tempered in heat and all that awful bloody thing is going through, and then it comes out a beautiful blade. But I recognise now that there were signposts littered on my path, my way, my walk, that I ignored but didn't realise at the time. One I've talked about it's the book called Swan's Song, fantasy book about a plague that hits the earth, and people's face crusts over with this chitin kind of thing on their face. They become unrecognisable and they think they're going to basically end up looking like that forever. Then it cracks and it falls apart to reveal their true self underneath. And then depending on your true self, it's going to be good or bad looking. So that's the dark night of the soul to a T. Didn't realise that when I read the book. It's talking about shedding old skin. The other thing that I knew of, and again I didn't link it until recently, and possibly during this conversation, was in the 3rd chapter of the book of Job, one of the darkest, when he says he criticises God, why me? All that. Dark night of the soul. And then Jonah, when he's praised from inside the fish. In my distress I called to the Lord and he answered me. Now I'm not a Christian, but that is, to me, there has to be parts of Scripture that are talking about this same thing, the dark night of the soul. And it's God's will then. It happens, and it's a good thing. But you wouldn't want to necessarily go through it at the time.
It's the place that you don't want to be, but it is the place that often you have to go through. You wouldn't choose it if you had the choice, but it's the place that you need to walk through in order to get to the point that you need to get to. And I know for me that in moments that I've had which have been incredibly dark, I've had to go through them. I've had to walk through those areas. Most of the cause of those things, those dark areas, have been my fault. They've been my poor choices or my poor decision making or whatever. But even that said, all of those things can be used in order to turn something into something else. There is nothing lost. There is nothing lost in this. You walk into it and you must go through it. And like I say, you've got to own it. You've got to own that darkness. You've got to say, yep, I know why I'm here and I know how I got here and I'm not going to blame somebody else for it. I'm going to walk and I'm going to walk and I'm going to walk. It was it Churchill who said, when you're going through hell, keep on going. You just got to keep on going. And that's what you have to do. Because when you do come out of it, you come out of it with a greater realization of all sorts of things and a greater value on the things that really do matter, the things that will last, things that will go beyond you. And I think also that you perhaps have a greater understanding, perhaps, or a greater awareness of legacy. What is it that you're going to leave behind? What's the mark that you're going to leave?
Oh, that's interesting, yeah.
A greater sense of your legacy and how you want to be remembered. I don't want to be remembered as some of the ways that I've behaved. I'd like to be remembered as somebody who leaves something better on other people than I took.
Hence these episodes. Because talking about this, I wouldn't have talked about this a couple of years ago. I would have been uncomfortable mentioning it and some of the stuff that I had to go through. I feel very comfortable talking about it now because it's needed. There's very few episodes out there on YouTube, for instance, about this.
Yeah, I think people are frightened to be vulnerable. Because we live in an age where we see vulnerability as a weakness to be exploited. And I don't think that being vulnerable is necessarily a weakness. It's obviously something that can be exploited. Vulnerabilities can obviously be exploited. But I don't think being honest and vulnerable in order to share an experience or experiences that can perhaps potentially benefit somebody else in their day-to-day living is a bad thing. I like to see real people. I like to see people who are real in their responses. I saw a guy yesterday sharing something in the front of a church, and he's an older guy, and he got really emotional as he was sharing it. And I'm sat there, and there was nothing significantly emotional about the words he was saying, but it was really emotional to him. And all that did was just add buckets and buckets and buckets of credibility to the words that he was saying and to the experience that he was going through. Because I was looking at him thinking, mate, good on you. You're not frightened to show that this has affected you and that it's had an emotional toll on you, rather than trying to be all staunch and up there and all the rest of it and nothing's going to ever touch me and I'm not vulnerable to anything or anyone. And you think to yourself, no, yeah you are. and you can put whatever layers on you want. But the reality is we all have vulnerabilities, but being vulnerable isn't necessarily a sign of being a weak individual. It's recognizing that you've come through those things and you can share those things easier. I think it's good.
It is healthy, and what would stop people doing it is that false sense of ego. The great purge for myself, I mean, this gentleman stood up and talked about it publicly. My great purge is I wrote it in a novel. I called it Adrift Upon the Deep. I had the misfortune of finishing it. It's my first novel during COVID, so no one was taking it on, and it still hasn't been accepted, but one day potentially will. And it's all about some guy who went through the same thing. He happened to do it when he was press ganged. That's the difference. So talking about this publicly and like we have done, you talk about a sense of purpose. It gives me a sense of purpose talking about it.
Well, it's good, mate. There's lots of things that are going to happen in life, right? And you can learn through something called experiential learning, i.e. learning through the experience of others. You don't have to experience everything yourself, but what you can do is you can learn from the experience of others who have gone through certain things, and you can then draw that into your own psyche. You can build that into your own system of self-management. You can build that into who you are. And you can use that to then set yourself on a trajectory which is going to add value to people. Our lives should be about adding value to those around us. And if we can just hold that in our thinking, that as we walk through this life, we're not always going to agree with everybody, but I don't think that's the purpose of our life. What we should be doing is looking to add value. And that value can be making somebody else think, making somebody else just stop, making them ask a question about why they hold a certain view. They may not change their view, but that doesn't matter. That's their choice. We should be looking to just build people up, encourage people to think well, encourage people to live their lives as well as possible, encourage people to find an anchor point to give them that purpose in life. I would say that there is a transcendent purpose that you can anchor into. Others would say there isn't. Like I said, that's cool. That's their choices, and whichever anchor point you find, make it one that is going to benefit others and not self-serve. So if you find an anchor point that is all about self, that ain't the best anchor point.
Yeah.
If you find an anchor point that is actually going to elevate you out of yourself and make you vulnerable to those around you and make you accessible to those around you and make your life experience of value to others so that they can see mistakes that you've made or things that you've done or lessons that you've learned, those are going to be positive things in the future. They will be.
Yes, a new currency, a way of admitting that we make mistakes, and learning from those mistakes is of value for others.
We say we're not perfect, and we talked about this with politicians. You know, politicians are not perfect. We shouldn't expect them to be perfect. We should have good ethics that they try and adhere to, and when they don't, then they fall on their sword. That's the way it goes, and they step aside. But we should be willing to cut people some slack as well, and we should be gracious towards people. But for the grace of God go I.
So if a person listening to this has ever been through it or knows somebody who has, please leave a comment. I'd like to know personally, but also know that it will not be the end. And just to reinforce for some people, I personally am not talking about a nervous breakdown, which is slightly different, or a mental breakdown. This is the ego breakdown or the stripping away. This is painful, just as painful, but we're not talking of that. Well, I don't think so anyway. I mean, it could be linked. I would say one of the hardest but potentially most worthwhile things, one of the most worthwhile things I've gone through.
None of what we have said would negate, getting good people around you to offer you support and good counsel and wise counsel and all the rest of it. That's not it.
Yes.
I found that this was something that I had to trudge through on my own, and I had to navigate that, and I had to work that out, and I had to come to my own conclusion, and I would not have been happy to share my thoughts and my thinkings with another individual about this. Just the way that I'm wired, I guess. Other people are different. I like the fact that, the foreword by Alan Jameson in the book The Dark Night of the Soul, he says this, he says, St. John bravely faced his own darkness. Naturally, none of us wants to enter the darkness. We all fight it, and this is normal. It's even encouraged by God. When periods of darkness come on us, we all long for the time before the darkness appeared. We all instinctively want to go back to when it was easier, clearer, and less painful. But we too must begin by owning our darkness. You know, we've got to be willing to just face these things and push our way forward and go, yep, okay, bring it on. I'll learn from this and I'll move through it. And not to give up, just keep going. So when you're going through hell, keep going, and keep going. You can wrap good people around you if that's the way that you're wired, and you've got good folk to bring around you and to support you. But if not, you get your head down and you crack on.
Are you through it now, or are you still going through it?
I would say that the dark night of the soul, I've come out of that tunnel at the other end of it. I'm into a new vistas. I'm stood at the tunnel, looking at the new vistas, going, flipping heck, what do I do here then? I don't know. I've got no idea where to go now. But the process of feeling totally lost and all adrift at sea, I don't sense that so much. I've been really I've been really fortunate. This is talking to you each week on the channels that we do, having a schedule and knowing that I've got this on this day and I'll be doing this. That's been really helpful. I've personally found that really helpful, just to meet up and discuss things and topics du jour has been really good. So putting a structure around my life when all of the structure's been stripped away has been beneficial to me. And also recognising that, there's other things, I've got my fingers in other pies which need to continually be kept cooking, has been helpful to me as well. I think the unravelling of 40 years that's still going to unravel. Those things are still going to unravel, but the sense of absolute loss, I likened redundancy last year to almost like a sense at a time of mourning, where you're just lost and everybody wraps around you for the first 30 seconds and then they all disappear and now you're just you on your own. So that has become easier and easier and easier and easier to deal with, and to the point where I'm much more comfortable with all of that, the decision making that I made, and I've reflected long and hard on all of that, but I'm certainly much more happy with that. I'd like to say that I've come out the end of the tunnel, and I look for the new vista and I await the next tunnel.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not, but if the tunnels are all about knocking off imperfections and purging you and refining you and then lifting you so that you can go on to another level somewhere in another way, then I guess I expect that there'll be another tunnel. I just hope it's little. It's a short little tunnel that I can zip through and it's like a bit like a blink. I wouldn't even know I've been in it. That would be helpful.
Touche.
I don't want forbidden all of the other nonsense. That's just too hard.
I just want to finish off. One of the things that I publicly did as I came out the tunnel was to put into practice the thing that I realised is very important, that's forgiveness. Now, my biological father, I've not seen since I was 8, but that trauma of my mum's divorce and whatever lingered with me until into my 50s. I publicly forgave him, and the lifting off of my shoulders was, I couldn't imagine beforehand. So I publicly ask forgiveness for anybody who I slighted or did wrong prior to the dark night of the soul, going back to my childhood, and I hope they forgive me. Because we all do it. We don't realise we're being dickheads half the time, especially men, especially when we've had a few drinks. So you got to forgive yourself and you got to forgive others. So I forgive everybody, and hopefully they'll forgive me. I'm not that person anymore.
Yep. That's right, mate. We change, we morph as we do our journey. I'm not the same bloke that I was 40 years ago, for sure. I'm not the same bloke I was 15 years ago either. That's definitely the case. And even 14 months ago, probably, I've changed as well again. So, constant process. Life is process. Life is a journey, not a destination.
And you are absolutely right. Doing these is a form of healing.
It's very cathartic.
I look forward to the next one then.
All right, well, mate, you look after yourself. Do take care. Lovely to chat.
Take care, boy.